The wedding reception was perfect, right up until the moment my sister locked the door and whispered that all her money was gone. Now, holding the evidence of his true identity, I have to face my new brother-in-law before dawn, or neither of us walks away from this marriage. The wedding reception was a shimmering, over-the-top affair that only my sister, Veronica, could orchestrate. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a ballroom floor packed with people who smelled faintly of expensive cologne and nervous ambition. I was standing near the champagne fountain, a dutiful maid of honor trying desperately to look invested in the joyous occasion, when Veronica pulled me aside. She didn't look joyous. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been left out in the rain, perfectly intact on the surface, but rapidly dissolving underneath. "Maya, come with me. Now." Her voice was a tight wire, pulled so taut I thought it might snap. We slipped away from the pulsating energy of the dance floor, past the towering, 5-tiered cake that probably cost more than my annual rent, and into the quiet sanctuary of the bridal suite. It was vast, scented with lilies, and utterly suffocating. Veronica immediately locked the heavy oak door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home echoed sharply in the sudden silence. She didn't move toward the velvet settee or the panoramic window overlooking the city lights. She walked directly to the vanity, picked up a silver-backed brush, and then dropped it with a clang that made me jump. "What is it, V? Is it Mark? Did you fight?" Mark was the groom, a man whose only discernible personality trait was successful investment banker. He seemed perfectly suited to Veronica's meticulous planning. She turned to face me, and that's when I saw it. Not just stress, but stark, cold terror etched around her usually flawless features. Her expensive, custom-made gown seemed to cling to her like a shroud. "It's not about Mark," she whispered, her eyes darting to the closed door as if someone might be listening through the thick wood. "It's about the money." My brow furrowed. "The money? What money? Your trust fund? Mark's assets? Don't tell me you guys pulled some prenup stunt already." Veronica shook her head violently, her diamond tiara catching the harsh vanity light. "No, worse. All of it. Everything. The house, the accounts, the business funding I was supposed to get next month." She took a ragged breath, clawing at the delicate lace of her bodice. "It's gone. Every last cent." I stared, utterly lost. Veronica's finances were legendary. She ran a moderately successful boutique design firm, but her foundation was always the substantial inheritance she and I received from our grandfather. It was supposed to be untouchable. Gone? How? Fraud? Did Mark? No, not Mark. It was taken. Sometime in the last week. I only found out this afternoon, right before I walked down the aisle. Her voice dropped again, sinking to a level that vibrated with desperation. I had to go through with it, Maya. I couldn't stop it. If I had canceled tonight, everyone would have known instantly. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the image of my polished, untouchable sister admitting total financial ruin. But why didn't you tell me earlier? We could have called the police, a lawyer. She grabbed my arms, her grip surprisingly strong. Her eyes, usually bright emerald green, were dark and shadowed. "Because the man I married isn't just a banker, Maya. He's part of the reason this happened. He's tangled up in something deep, something volatile. If he knew I knew about the missing money tonight before the ink is dry on these vows..." She trailed off, swallowing hard. Then she leaned in close, her breath smelling faintly of champagne and panic. The sheer urgency in her posture made the chaos of the reception outside feel a million miles away. "You have to promise me something, Maya. Promise me you won't mention this to anyone. And if anyone asks about my financial situation, or if they look at me funny, or if Mark asks you anything personal about me tomorrow—" She paused, her gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that stole my breath. My sister whispered, "Tell him you lost everything," and the reason became clear the next day. The silence that followed Veronica's instruction was suffocating, heavier than the silk of her gown. The words hung in the air, sharp and nonsensical. Tell him you lost everything. Tell who everything? Mark? And why would telling Mark about her hypothetical financial ruin be a good thing, especially if he was already tangled in whatever mess she alluded to? "Lost everything?" I repeated, trying to inject some logic into the swirling panic in my head. "V, you just married a millionaire. Why would telling him you're broke, which you aren't officially, solve anything? Wouldn't that just make him protective? Or worse, suspicious?" Veronica pushed me back slightly, her movements jerky. "No, Maya, you don't understand the leverage he has, or had. If he thinks I'm financially devastated, he'll think he has total control. He'll believe I'm clinging to this marriage out of sheer desperation for security. He'll think I can't afford to challenge him, investigate him, or leave him." "But you can't leave him, can you? Not if he's responsible for taking your money," I argued, gesturing wildly. "This is insane. You need to tell the police. We need to call Dad's lawyer right now before this reception ends, and you're legally bound to whatever trap he's set." Veronica's face hardened with a grim resolve I hadn't seen since we were kids, sneaking out of summer camp. "The lawyer is useless. The money wasn't just stolen, Maya. It was moved. It vanished into a shell corporation based in the Caymans last Tuesday. Mark oversees those accounts. He has the access codes. If I make a move tonight, he will find out I'm onto him, and the legal mess will be the least of my worries." She leaned forward again, her voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear her over the distant bass of the music filtering through the walls. "He thinks I'm marrying him because he's stable, because I'm looking for a safe harbor after a recent string of bad investments. He's smug about it. He thinks he's won. If I tell him I've lost everything, meaning I'm broke without him, he'll drop his guard. He'll see me as a liability, not a threat. He'll become careless." "Careless about what?" I demanded, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was turning into a full-blown crime drama. Careless about the real ledger, the one he keeps hidden, the one that proves he's been moving more than just my funds. Her eyes flickered toward a discreet wall, safe tucked behind a large oil painting of a pastoral scene. I saw the corner of a binder when he left his study unlocked yesterday. It had numbers that didn't match any known business records. He was planning something huge, Maya, something that needed massive, untraceable capital. My inheritance was just the starter fuel. A sudden sharp rap on the door made both of us freeze mid-sentence. "Veronica? Darling? Everything all right in there? I just wanted to bring you a little nightcap before we head to the suite." It was Mark's voice, smooth as silk but carrying a razor's edge of proprietary ownership. Veronica straightened instantly, wiping a non-existent smudge from her cheek. The transformation was immediate. The terrified sister was gone, replaced by the flawless bride. "Perfect timing, my love," she called out, her voice bright and musical. "Just fixing my veil. It slipped. Be right there." She turned back to me, her expression severe. "Remember the instruction. I'll handle Mark tonight. You are to disappear after the toasts and meet me at the old boathouse on the lake tomorrow morning at dawn. Not before. Not after. If I am not there by 6:15 a.m., you go to the police with everything I told you." She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "And Maya," she added, her voice suddenly laced with chilling sincerity, "if Mark tries to get you alone tonight, asking probing questions about my mood or my family's finances, you use the line. Tell him I've lost everything. Make him believe it." She unlocked the door just as Mark knocked again, this time with a low, insistent cadence that brooked no argument. Veronica slipped out, radiating the perfect picture of a happy, slightly overwhelmed bride, and Mark, beaming, stepped into the room just enough for me to see his polished shoes and perfectly tailored tuxedo. "Sorry to interrupt your little sister chat," he said, his eyes scanning the room, lingering a moment too long on the open jewelry box on the vanity. "Ronnie was just getting overwhelmed. She's very sensitive right now, you know, all that pressure." He gave me a condescending smile, the kind that suggests you're merely part of the furniture. "You were telling her something important, Maya? About her recent investments? She seemed a little distracted earlier." My mind flashed back to Veronica's face, the terror, the urgency. Tell him you lost everything. Was this the moment? Did she want me to play the part of the worried, clueless sibling who had just discovered a devastating secret? I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of a terrible deception settling onto my shoulders. I looked straight at Mark, feeling my own fear solidify into a strange, cold resolve. "Actually, Mark," I began, my voice deliberately shaky, "we were just discussing Veronica's final account settlement. It's been a nightmare. She's been completely devastated because—" I paused, letting the silence stretch, watching his confident posture subtly tighten. "Because what, Maya?" he prompted, taking a slow step further into the room, his gaze suddenly sharper, less friendly. "Because," I whispered, leaning in conspiratorially, playing the role she'd assigned me, "she just found out she lost everything." Mark's reaction wasn't immediate fury or shock. It was something far more chilling, a momentary absolute stillness, like a predator catching the scent of prey it thought had escaped. His practiced, easy smile evaporated, replaced by a look of stark assessment. He didn't blink. He just studied my face, searching for the lie, the tremor, the tell that I was bluffing. "Lost everything?" he repeated, his voice dangerously level, entirely stripped of the polite geniality he'd used seconds before. "That's a rather dramatic statement, isn't it, Maya? Especially tonight. Are you feeling quite well?" I forced myself to meet his gaze, remembering Veronica's instructions. He'll think I'm clinging to this marriage out of sheer desperation for security. He'll think I can't afford to challenge him. I had to sell the devastation. "It's true," I insisted, injecting a note of desperate pity into my tone. "She didn't want to tell you so soon, not tonight. But the market correction hit her private fund harder than anyone predicted. The advisors were completely wrong. She liquidated everything this afternoon trying to stop the bleeding, but it wasn't enough. She's ruined, Mark. Financially dependent on you now. She's terrified." Mark took another slow step, closing the distance between us until he was standing directly over me. I could smell his expensive aftershave mixing with the heavy scent of lilies. He reached out, but instead of touching me, he brushed a stray piece of lint off my shoulder, his fingers lingering just a second too long on my neck. "Ruined?" he murmured, a strange, almost satisfied note entering his voice. My poor, naive Veronica. All that ambition, brought down by a few bad calls. He straightened up, looking toward the closed door where Veronica had just exited. I suppose that explains her nervousness earlier. He turned back to me and the mask was back in place, but it was tighter now, less convincing. Thank you for sharing that sensitive information with me, Maya, truly. It's good to know where we stand. He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. You seem remarkably composed for someone relaying news of familial bankruptcy, though. Did Veronica tell you the extent of the damage? This was the crucial moment. If I wavered, if I revealed I knew more than just the surface-level bad investment, he would know I was lying or that Veronica had told me the real story, the theft, the ledger, the Caymans. No, she was too upset, I lied smoothly, channeling the vacant distress I'd seen in her eyes earlier. She just kept saying everything. She sounded like she'd been completely wiped out. That's why I said I needed to leave early tomorrow. I need to figure out how to help her rebuild, even a little. Mark nodded slowly, a thin, predatory smile spreading across his face. Rebuild, yes. Well, that's where I come in, isn't it? Now that we're one family, I can take care of things. I'll handle the messy paperwork. She won't have to worry her pretty little head about it. He waved a dismissive hand toward the safe behind the painting. Those private accounts she was so worried about? They're mine now, effectively. She should feel safe. He thinks he's won. That's good of you, Mark, I managed to say, feeling a wave of nausea. He was accepting the narrative instantly, confirming his belief that Veronica was now completely reliant on him. He thought the leverage was entirely on his side. It is, he agreed, walking toward the door. He opened it slightly, peering out into the ballroom, then closed it again softly. Now, Maya, I need you to do one last thing for me before you leave tonight. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it, the test. Anything, I replied, my voice barely a breath. When you go back to your room, he instructed, his eyes boring into mine, I need you to leave your phone charging on the bedside table. Don't take it with you, even to the restroom. I'm going to have a discreet word with Veronica in a few minutes, and I need absolute peace and quiet to reassure her about this unfortunate turn of events. I don't want any prying eyes or ears listening in, especially from her little sister. He was ordering me to leave evidence that I had gone straight to my room and remained there, ensuring I couldn't slip out to the boathouse early or call anyone. He was establishing an alibi for me while simultaneously securing his opportunity to deal with Veronica without interruption. Understood, I agreed, fighting the urge to snatch my phone off the counter where I'd left it. Mark gave a final, chillingly satisfied nod. Good girl, now run along. The toasts are starting again and Veronica will need her maid of honor back out there looking supportive. He stepped aside, allowing me to pass. I walked out of the bridal suite, the heavy door clicking shut behind me with a quiet finality that felt like a closing coffin lid. I navigated the crowd, nodding mechanically, aware of Mark's presence just behind me, guiding his new wife back into the spotlight. I found my way downstairs to the coat check, retrieved my simple evening bag, and made my way toward the side exit near the kitchens, pretending I was heading back to my room. My phone was still on the vanity in the guest room upstairs, exactly where Mark expected it to be, but I hadn't left my other phone. Tucked deep inside the lining of my evening clutch, I carried the old, cheap flip phone I kept for emergencies, the one with a disposable SIM card I rarely used. I ducked into a rarely used service hallway near the loading dock, pulled out the burner phone, and dialed the number Veronica had drilled into my memory just last month during a crisis over a contract breach. It rang twice. Then a heavily distorted voice answered, "Go ahead." "It's Maya," I hissed into the phone, my entire body trembling with adrenaline. The story is set. Mark bought it. He thinks Veronica is broke and desperate, and he's isolating her now to reassure her. He thinks I'm staying put until morning. There was a long pause on the other end. Then the distorted voice cut through, low and sharp. That's good, but you need to leave sooner than planned. Maya, listen closely. The reason Veronica told you to say she lost everything wasn't just for Mark's benefit. It was insurance. If he takes control tonight, you need to know why. Why? I pleaded, glancing frantically down the hallway, terrified Mark might have noticed my absence. Because the money isn't the real target. It was the bait, the ledger he's hiding. It details his involvement in moving the offshore assets of a very dangerous organization. When he believes Veronica is desperate and powerless, he'll try to secure access to her grandfather's primary estate. The one thing he can't touch until after the wedding legally transfers control of her other assets. He needs her final signature on a specific document, a transfer of power of attorney, to bypass the 7-day waiting period on the primary trust. My blood turned to ice. What document? Where is it? It's hidden in the bottom of the cake display table. He plans to have Veronica sign it in the privacy of their suite after the final dance. It has to happen before midnight. You need to get to that table now and retrieve it. If you can't get to it, you have to destroy it. If he gets that signature tonight, you won't just lose your inheritance, Maya. You'll never see Veronica again. Destroy the cake table? My mind screamed at the sheer impossibility of the task. The cake display was the centerpiece of the entire reception, surrounded by a velvet rope and guarded by 2 towering, stony-faced security men hired specifically by Mark to manage the valuable gifts and the massive multi-story confection itself. The cake? I choked out into the burner phone. It's surrounded by security, and the real reception hasn't even ended. Mark is with her right now. You bought yourself 20 minutes, maybe 30, while he reassures her. The distorted voice replied, the urgency palpable. He'll keep her distracted, but he won't want the signing to drag on. The transfer needs to be finalized before the banks open tomorrow, or the whole scheme unravels. Go. Now. Use the service tunnel you saw near the kitchen entrance when you came in. Distract the guards. I'll keep you on the line until you're right at the display. Hanging up the burner phone, I stuffed it back into the clutch. Every instinct told me to run, to flee the venue, get in a cab, and head for the boathouse to wait for Veronica at dawn. But the image of my sister, trapped in that suite with a man who was now openly orchestrating her financial and literal captivity, anchored me. If Mark succeeded in getting that power of attorney before midnight, Veronica would vanish into a legal black hole he controlled. I turned and sprinted back toward the kitchen entrance, the rhythmic thud of my heels on the polished marble, feeling deafeningly loud. The service hallway was dark, smelling of grease and discarded floral arrangements. I located the metal fire door that led back toward the main ballroom entrance. Peeking through the small, reinforced window, I saw the scene in miniature. The elegant dance floor, the lingering guests, and dead center, the imposing, glittering structure that held the wedding cake, a sugary monument to Mark's ego. Flanking it were the 2 security behemoths, their arms crossed, their gazes sweeping the room with military precision. I needed a distraction, something loud and chaotic enough to draw their attention away from the base of the display, but not so disruptive that it brought the whole party to a halt. My eyes scanned the periphery of the service hallway. I spotted a catering cart laden with empty champagne bottles, waiting to be whisked away. Perfect. I grabbed the handle of the cart and, with a grunt of exertion, swung it out into the main hallway leading to the ballroom doors. Then, with a sharp shove, I sent the cart careening directly toward the grand entryway where the band was currently playing a slow, saccharine ballad. The collision was spectacular. Glass shattered with the sound of a gunshot. Waiters shrieked. The music screeched to a halt as the bartender dove for cover. In the momentary chaos, I bolted toward the cake display. The two guards were instantly diverted, their instincts overriding their protocol. They moved toward the noise, shouting into their communication earpieces. I slipped past the velvet rope. The cake was impossibly tall, intricately decorated with sugar pearls and fondant roses. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the stares of the nearest table guests who were pointing at the wreckage. My hands scrabbled at the base pedestal, searching for any seam or panel. My burner phone vibrated wildly in my clutch. It was the contact from before, whispering urgently, "Hurry, Maya. You have maybe 5 minutes before they realize the diversion was a feint." "I can't find a panel," I whispered back, my fingers tracing the carved wooden skirting around the base. "It feels solid." "Look lower. They always hide the key documents near the heaviest structural point for stability. Feel for any loose molding." My breath hitched. My fingers brushed against something slick. Not fondant, but cold metal disguised crudely beneath a layer of icing meant to look like ivy. I pulled hard. A small rectangular section of the base, no bigger than a thick book, popped open with a soft, sickening suction sound, revealing a shallow, dark recess inside the pedestal. And there it was. Not a binder, but a slim, leather-bound document folded once. It was the power of attorney. As my fingers closed around the cool leather, I heard heavy footsteps pounding back toward the display. The distraction was over. "Hey, you, get away from the cake!" one of the guards roared, his voice devoid of restraint. I yanked the document free and scrambled backward, clutching it to my chest. I didn't have time to run back the way I came. The two guards were already converging on either side of the table. I was trapped between the glittering monument of the wedding and the angry security detail. I looked desperately around. The only viable exit was directly through the guests, which would expose me completely. Then, my eyes landed on the cake itself. It was nearly 8 feet tall. If I couldn't get around it, maybe I could use it. Ignoring the shouts, I spun around, placed both hands flat against the side of the tower, and pushed with every ounce of strength I possessed. The entire structure groaned ominously. The sugar pearls rained down. The upper tiers began to tilt, slowly at first, then with sickening speed, toward the area where the security guards were advancing. The two men saw the catastrophic shift in balance an instant too late. With a sound like grinding thunder, the massive cake collapsed in on itself, sending pounds of frosting, sugar, and heavy internal supports cascading over the entire display area, burying the security detail in a sweet, sticky avalanche of ruin. I scrambled away from the wreckage, the folded document still clenched in my hand, completely coated in white frosting and edible glitter. I burst through the velvet rope and sprinted toward the kitchen doors, heart hammering, knowing I had just caused an event that would bring Mark's full attention down upon me faster than anything else could. I burst through the service door, the burner phone back to my ear. "I have it! I got the document! I'm heading for the service exit now. I have to—" The line went dead. I stared at the useless phone in my hand. As I reached the final exit door leading out to the dark, misty grounds, the door handle began to turn from the inside. I froze, pressing myself against the cold metal frame. Through the small window in the door, I saw a familiar silhouette. Not Mark, but Veronica, her wedding dress smeared with what looked like mud and flour, her face pale and drawn. She wasn't heading out. She was coming back toward the main hall. She looked directly at the service door window, her eyes wide with a terror that surpassed anything I had seen before. She didn't speak. She didn't gesture. She simply pressed her palms hard against the glass, slowly, deliberately, drawing a single massive letter onto the condensation with her fingertip. The letter was a D. Then, before I could process the meaning, she was yanked backward violently, swallowed by the darkness of the hallway leading back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone on the wrong side of the door, clutching a stolen legal document, knowing that the designated meeting place was compromised and that the entire plan had just imploded. The letter D seared itself into my mind. D for danger, D for destroyed, D for deceived. Veronica hadn't been trying to reach the outside. She was trying to warn me about something inside. And if she had been pulled back inside, it meant Mark had discovered my brief intrusion, or worse, that the security failure had brought him back to the suite faster than anticipated. I shoved the service door open, ignoring the lingering sounds of chaos near the ruined cake. The grounds outside were vast, shadowy, and laced with early morning fog rolling in from the nearby lake. The boathouse felt impossibly far away. My first priority shifted instantly. Veronica was in immediate peril. The boathouse plan was void. I had to deal with Mark and whatever D represented right now. I pulled out the burner phone again, dialing the distorted contact one last time, praying the connection held. They know. Veronica saw me. She drew a D on the window near the service exit and was pulled back inside. I gasped, sprinting across the manicured lawn toward the dark outline of the main house. The voice on the other end remained maddeningly calm. The D is irrelevant now, Maya. You're operating on old intel. Mark anticipated you trying to retrieve the document. He likely moved the signing location the moment you caused the diversion. Then where is she? Where's he taking her? The boathouse, Maya. He is taking her to the boathouse. That was the true destination all along. The power of attorney isn't for the estate. That was the decoy story you sold him. The document you hold isn't the POA. He needs her alive, but compliant at that location by dawn to sign the real agreement, the one that seals the deal with his associates. My blood ran cold. What real agreement? The one that involves the offshore movement of the assets, the evidence in the ledger. He needed Veronica's physical presence as a witness, not her signature. He needed to present her as a willing participant in the transfer of funds to his dangerous organization. You have the bait, Maya. Now you need to use it. I stopped dead in my tracks. The nearest security detail, alerted by the cake disaster, was already sweeping the perimeter near the main entrance. I had seconds. How do I use this? I demanded, holding up the leather-bound paper I'd wrestled from the cake pedestal. It felt thin, almost flimsy now that the adrenaline was fading. It's not the POA. It's the ledger itself, Maya. The one that proves the fraud. Mark didn't hide the ledger. He hid the index to the ledger inside the cake to make you think you had the vital piece. He planned for you to steal the decoy index, giving him the perfect cover story. My sister-in-law, Maya, stole a crucial document in a state of panic, likely involving shady associates, forcing me to take immediate protective action with Veronica. He wanted you to run with that, making you look like the conspirator. So the document I have is useless? No. It's the only thing that makes you credible. Get to the boathouse. Use it to trade for Veronica. The grounds were too open. I couldn't risk being caught running toward the lake in the fog with 2 security guards actively hunting me. I glanced back at the mansion. The bridal suite was on the 2nd floor, overlooking the sprawling back lawn. I'm going back to the suite, I stated, making the decision instantly. If Mark believes I have the decoy, he'll go back to the suite to find Veronica immediately, thinking she's the one who put me up to it, or that she hid the real papers there. Maya, that's suicide. He'll be waiting. I cut him off. Tell me what Veronica meant by D. What was she warning me about in the suite? A sharp intake of breath on the line. That's not about the document, that's personal. Mark isn't just hiding fraud, Maya. He's hiding his identity. When you get back to that suite, look for something that doesn't belong to him, something that matches the first letter of the man he claims to be, the one he was before he became Mark. I didn't wait for more confirmation. I cut the line, sprinted across the lawn toward the nearest low window, one that belonged to the ground floor sitting room adjacent to the main hall. I smashed the glass with a heavy stone I snatched from the landscaping, ignoring the agonizing rip as shards caught my sleeve. I tumbled into the room, landing hard on an expensive Persian rug. I scrambled to my feet and darted through the connecting door into the main corridor leading to the stairs. The security guards were still occupied near the cake wreckage. I had maybe 90 seconds. I flew up the marble staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the stolen document in my hand. I reached the bridal suite door. It was locked, but Mark's haste meant he hadn't bothered with silent security measures. I slammed my shoulder against the oak paneling, once, twice, fueled by pure terror. The lock shuddered. On the third impact, the door burst open. The room was empty, but not entirely. The massive, luxurious bed was a disaster, sheets tangled. The vanity mirror was cracked, not from the earlier impact, but radiating spiderweb fractures from a central point of impact. And on the floor, next to the vanity, was a single glittering diamond earring, one of the ones Veronica had been wearing just hours ago. Then I saw it. On the pristine white duvet of the ruined bed, written not in icing or condensation, but etched deeply into the expensive fabric with what looked like the tip of a letter opener, was a single block letter, D. It wasn't a warning to me. It was a message from Mark, left for Veronica. I spun around, searching frantically for a hiding place that Mark might use, or a sign of a struggle, when my eyes caught on the only object that looked truly out of place in the opulent room, a heavy, antique-looking first aid kit sitting on the bedside table, incongruous with the modern decor. I lunged for it and yanked the lid open. Inside, nestled beneath sterile gauze and antiseptic wipes, was a black, hardcover journal. It was the real ledger. It was thick, heavy, and filled with coded entries. As I lifted the journal, the floorboards outside the room creaked heavily. Footsteps, slow, deliberate. Not the frantic pace of security, but the measured stride of a man closing in for the kill. I didn't have time to look at the first page. I didn't have time to process the meaning of the letter D. I had the evidence. I turned to the window, the one overlooking the darkened lawn and the path leading down to the lake. The fog was so thick now the grounds were invisible from this height, but the sound of the approaching footsteps was right outside the door. I hoisted the heavy ledger up, preparing to throw it out into the relative safety of the dense fog and run after it, when the door handle began to turn, slowly, softly, precisely how Mark had turned it when he left me in the hallway earlier. He hadn't been leaving to reassure Veronica. He had been leaving to check the decoy. I stared, paralyzed, as the door began to swing inward, revealing the silhouette of the man I thought was my brother-in-law, holding something long and metallic in his hand. "You shouldn't have come back, Maya." Mark's voice drifted in, cold and resonant. "And you certainly shouldn't have touched my diary. You think I let my wife wander off alone? You just signed both of our death warrants."